Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Quest Connect. Lovely to be here with you today. This is a beautiful Sunday on the 6th of April 2025. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tamika and I'm one of the senior facilitators at the Quest for Life Foundation. Now, Quest for Life offers this recording once a month, the first Sunday of the month, and this is for an hour. And for those of you who have been to Quest before, this is an opportunity for you to get a reminder or refresher of some of the Quest teachings and philosophies. And if you haven't been to Quest before, I'm hoping that you might find the content of this talk to be useful, because today we're going to be talking about navigating change and challenge. And we don't get to go through this life without experiencing some sort of challenge in life. It's a bit of a given, isn't it? We have ups and downs in life, and today we're going to talk about how to navigate those changes and perhaps how to embrace the new version of yourself, because you might find yourself asking, who am I now? Not really knowing who this new version of you is after being confronted with some challenge or loss. So I'm coming to you today from the back of Matcham Valley in New South Wales in Australia. And so if you could let me know that you can see me or hear me, that would be fabulous. But we will continue on and just assume that it's all working, so we'll keep on going. So we are going to start today by doing that little practice of coming to your senses. And I say a little practice, but I tell you what, it's a life-changing practice. If you can start to apply this into your life on a daily basis, it is life-changing for you. And we're going to do a little formal practice for about 5 minutes now, but of course it can be connecting with one of the senses that makes a lot of difference to your life. Because often we're caught up in our busy mind, our busy monkey mind, which has us ruminating about the past or going into the future, or we're getting into our anxiety. And of course that's our depression and anxiety. If we're rehashing or revisiting stuff from the past, we're getting a bit dragged down by the past. It's like we've got, a ball and chain pulling us back. And then if we're going into the future, we're going into anxiety because we don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. In the next second, we don't know what's going to happen. Things are sort of a little bit out of our control. But staying in the present moment is such a gift. And if you can get that, if you can have that by just taking little moments where you're even connecting with one of your senses, perhaps even taking a breath, feeling your feet on the floor, listening to one sound. We're going to go through the 5 senses in this little practice. And there is an 8-minute version of this coming to your senses on the Quest for Life website from Petria King. So if you'd like to go onto the Quest for Life website, it's a free version for you there as well. So I am going to invite you to, if you can, to close your eyes. I'm going to leave my eyes open today, but you can leave them open or close them. So just if you're closing your eyes, just allow yourself to focusing on the breath. Close your eyes, focus on the breath, and just being curious about where you notice the breath. Is it at the back of the throat, the upper chest, the diaphragm, or the belly? And just notice how your body moves as you breathe. This one breath that we quite often take for granted, this breathing thing. So it's very important. So just see if you can focus on it just consciously for a moment and just notice your body moving as you breathe. And I'm going to invite you to extend the breath, the exhalation. So breathing in deeply and breathing out completely, just letting go of all the air. You might even like to imagine that you've got a balloon in your belly as you breathe in, and you're filling up that balloon, maybe even placing your hand on your belly. So breathing in, filling up that air in that balloon. And then breathing out, just letting all that air out with a slightly longer exhalation. And as you breathe out, you might notice that your shoulders drop and you can feel your body sink into the support of the chair just a little bit more. You're just following that natural flow, the natural rhythm of your breath. As you start to track down through your body, maybe just like a scan, going from left to right, from the top of your head right down to the tips of your toes. And just being curious about what you can feel right here, right now. Maybe you might like to wiggle your toes in your awareness. And then just noticing all the contact points with your body, with the surface beneath you, with the chair. Or you might notice some cool air from a fan or an air conditioning. You might even notice where your clothing makes contact with your skin. Just being curious about what you can feel in this moment as you connect with the sense of touch. And then take your focus to the sense of hearing. You might like to imagine that you've got little microphones in both ears, and your hearing can extend right out into the environment, just tracking any sounds. It's a Sunday, there might be the sounds of people mowing lawns, doing gardening, might be the sounds of life, traffic, or nature, birds, children, family. Just noticing what you can hear, tracking one sound, letting that go, noticing another sound and letting that go. And then bringing it back to sounds that are closer to you, sounds within the room, and even the sound of my voice, or possibly even sounds within your own body. Gurglings, rumblings in the tummy, the breath, the heartbeat. Just being curious about what you can hear in this moment. And then taking your focus to the sense of sight. If your eyes are open, just track around the room and just notice what you can see in your visual awareness right here, right now. If your eyes are closed and you've taken away those visual distractions, perhaps there's a veil of darkness, a glimmer of light at the bottom of the eyelids. It's what you can see right here, right now, with eyes open or closed. And then the sense of smell, tracking any scents or aromas in the air. And very closely related is the sense of taste. So take your focus down to the mouth and become aware of any sensations in the mouth. Just quietening the mind as much as you can, giving it a little rest, and connecting in with all of the senses of your body and the breath. Just coming back to the breath. Maybe starting to lengthen the breath a little bit more now, bringing a little bit of energy back into your body, having a little bit of a stretch, moving your head from side to side. And when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes if you've got your eyes closed. Okay, so let us dive into today. I can't see anybody logged on at this stage, but the beauty of this is that you can go on to all of the videos on the Quest for Life Facebook page and you can watch them later. So there's really no need to be on live. You're probably out enjoying this beautiful day outside today. So this question, when we run the Quest programs, the residential healing programs, a lot of people come down there when they're confronted with some form of challenge. And as I said, we don't get to go through this life without experiencing some challenge. And they'll often sort of say, I don't know who I am. Who am I? Who am I now? And so what we're going to be doing today is embracing change after a challenge or a diagnosis. So that might be easier said than done because a lot of us don't like change. We like things to stay the same, or we might be caught in that same rut, like a bit of a rat on the wheel, doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's often a change or a challenge that will catapult us out of that wheel, and we might feel a little bit derailed. So we're going to look at how you can get back onto the rails again, but possibly in a different way, because maybe the way that you were living your life before the challenge wasn't so helpful for you. When you do get catapulted off, it can feel a little bit like you're at a crossroads, looking back at the version of your life that was so far, and maybe experiencing a different version of yourself now, maybe one that you're not real happy with because of the current situation, but then not really knowing what the next version of yourself is going to be. So that's that, who am I now? And feeling that, a little bit of that confusion there as well. And as I said, it's a great question. I love it when people sort of say, who am I now? What am I here for? You know, that's life-changing when you get to that stage. And Petrea calls this, Petrea King, our founder of the Quest for Life Foundation, she has what we call a recipe for peace. And I love that. You know, you actually get a recipe for peace. And these are 4 qualities that you can bring into your life that enforce change and bring in peace into your life. And just very briefly, the first C is to regain a sense of control over your response to life. So that's looking at the difference between the reaction and the response, because a lot of us go through life reacting to things that are out of our control. The second C is the commitment to living, so looking at how you prioritise yourself. The art of communication, how you communicate with yourself and others. The getting to a place of acceptance or forgiveness for yourself, forgiveness or forgiveness of something that's happened to you in your life. And then the third C is the sense of challenge. How do you make meaning out of the challenge? And the fourth C is a sense of connection. So today we're sort of going to really be like teasing around that third C. How do you make meaning out of it? Because sometimes it feels a little bit, meaningless when you're right in the midst of it. I really want to say, or in the middle of challenge, there's no way that you're going to be able to make meaning out of it. But maybe after this talk, we might give you some skills and strategies on ways to be able to see your way through. So, yes, Petrea talks about if you want peace, somehow or other, you need to make meaning out of the challenge. Now, and I always find this one a little bit tricky to talk to on the Quest programs, because if people are in the middle of you might have a current diagnosis, or you might have just lost somebody that you love, or you've got something physically wrong with your body, you might have been in an accident, who knows what it is. How can you possibly make meaning out of that? Because it feels really crap when you're in it. And don't you just hate it when people sort of say things like, oh, this happens for a reason, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You probably just sort of feel like hitting them, really. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that at all. But it is around looking at, well, okay, this is happening to me, and it's an opportunity to shift things around and change things up. But it also is about accepting the new version of you, and it sometimes can be like a metaphorical death of you as you were, and a rebirth of you into the new version of you. Yeah? I want you to hang on to that one, because that's quite empowering. The metaphorical death, maybe where you let go of patterns of behaviour that don't serve you anymore, and you might start to really look at how you can live your life well, which is what we're getting at. So Petrea didn't make meaning out of her challenge. Petrea was diagnosed with leukemia when she was in her early 30s, and she was given something like 10 weeks to live, and she had 2 small children. And she basically packed her life up in a suitcase, organised all of her will, organised her young children to go and live with their dad, and she went over to live in a spiritual community over in Italy, and found herself in St. Francis's Cave over in Assisi, where she just meditated for many, many hours a day, or sobbed. She had a lot going on in her life up until that time, and that diagnosis and that huge loss and trauma brought her to her knees. She often says her first book could be called Sob Your Way to Health, because she just cried and wept all the tears that she'd been holding for many, many years. So when she came back to Australia, she actually went into remission. Now, who knows why that happens? All we can know is that it did happen, and people go into remission for many, many reasons. But we like to think that if you start to bring some positive changes into your life, it can really help, because your body has the capacity to heal itself. So when she was over in the trauma of going through that challenge of having to leave her children behind, and thinking she'd been given a prognosis if you got 10 weeks, there's no way she could have made meaning out of that, because it wasn't good, it was crap. But it was when she came back and went into remission, that's when she got to the stage of sort of thought, okay, so I'm back now, I'm alive, what am I going to do? So Petrea's meaning that she made out of her challenge was that she set up the Quest for Life Foundation. Now, it doesn't have to be that big, you don't all have to go and set up a foundation, but it does mean that you can, do something for yourself. Perhaps the meaning that you might make out of this is, if you've been abandoning yourself up until now, up until this current health crisis or challenge or whatever it is, maybe the meaning that you make from this current challenge is that between now and when I ultimately do go, I'm going to make myself a priority, which harks back to that second C, the commitment to living. How do you prioritise your body? You look after your body. How do you prioritise your mind? Keep it in good company, quieten it. Acknowledge your feelings and connecting with spirit. Yeah, so sometimes just that, the little things are the big things. Maybe that's the meaning that you can make from this current challenge. But I do want to frame up that there can be great discomfort in change, and yet it's often through that change, a diagnosis or a loss, that we're often catapulted towards change. Yeah? And it can feel a little bit scary. So the types of challenges, I've already touched on some of them. Illness, loss, career shifts, breakdown of marriage, relationship, or financial struggles, personal struggles, aging, the aging and staging process of life, transitions, retirement. Can be an accident where you might have the loss of mobility of your body. Lots of things can happen. And Petrea calls these the Ds. When we're confronted with the Ds, a death, a diagnosis, divorce, a disaster, there's lots of Ds. And it's sort of like a metaphorically, it just stops us in our tracks, and it shakes your sense of identity as to who am I really. Because often what happens is we cope with life. And, one thing happens and we get derailed, and we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, get back up on the rails again and keep on going. And that works until it doesn't. And sometimes, something happens where you get to the stage of like, what I was doing before is no longer working, and something needs to change, and maybe it's me. So the other sort of challenges that we often experience in life is maybe early childhood trauma, suffering, pain or loss. So there can be lots of challenges, and what can happen is if you've experienced a lot of challenges throughout your life, we build up this resilience where we just keep on pushing through. Perhaps you were brought up with that belief that you just pick yourself up, dust yourself up and keep on going, and as I said, get back on those tracks again. So you build up these coping strategies in order to keep going, to keep moving. It's keeping busy. These are some things that you can do. You might keep busy, you might do avoidance or denial. You might start to numb out your emotions or push your emotions down. Procrastinating, zoning out, numbing out. There's lots of ways we can zone and numb out now with all of our devices that we have. Substance abuse. We can start to isolate or withdraw from others or life. Overfunctioning or perfectionism. Focusing too much on others, trying to get it right for other people. And then in doing that, you're abandoning yourself. That's actually the fawning. There's the fight, flight, freeze in the trauma response, but then now there's a new one called fawning as a trauma response as well, where you run around trying to get it right for everybody. So they'll like and accept you. And in doing so, you abandon yourself. Being self-critical, being really hard on yourself. Often staying in harmful or toxic relationships because it feels familiar. Perhaps it's what you had in your early childhood, and that's just what you kind of expect now. So if you can relate to any of these, just please be gentle with yourself. We often cope the best way we know how with what we were given. Yeah. And as I said, they work until they don't, and then one day you just go, this is just not working anymore, I need to do something different, something's got to change, and it's me. And then you might find yourself Googling help, give me some sort of retreat, and you find yourself down at the Quest for Life Centre on a residential healing program. So just to share a personal story with you around how this works, how quite often challenge and change can catapult you towards change. I want to sort of first talk a little bit about the beliefs that you sometimes often take on when you're young, and how metaphorically they can get up and drive your bus Imagine you've got a double-decker bus, and in that bus you've got all the different parts of you. And sometimes, you might have the responsible part, the hardworking part, the fearful part, the anxious part, the sad part, whatever it is. And that part gets up into the driver's seat and starts to take control of your life. And that becomes your coping strategy, your survival strategy. So some of the beliefs could be, I have to get it right for everyone else in order to be accepted. And that's where that perfectionism can come in as well. Or it could be something like, I need to look after others or care for others in order to be accepted. So personally for me, I had the coping strategy, or the belief that I took on, that I have to be responsible. I have to keep busy. I have to get it right. And I also had the avoiding and denial of any feelings for the first part of my life. And to me, that was the only way that I knew how to live. That was like an automatic, it was my second nature for me to be this way. So when I think about that first part of my life, like up until my late 30s, I was very preoccupied with my own suffering and challenges and caught up in my busy, self-critical mind. And was tied up with the past, going over the past and constantly worrying or being anxious about the future. And I was so not present in my life, so not present. And when I sort of think back about it, I was probably one of the most unaware people walking on the planet. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I was in that automatic pilot, just doing what I did, and it all looked good from the exterior. But inside it was not good. I was just filled, you can imagine the chemistry that I was sort of carrying in my body of that constant stress and being self-critical. It was sort of like I needed a flogging stick, bashing myself up. So no surprise that in my late 30s I had an emotional breakdown. And it was never a diagnosed breakdown. I know that if I would have gone to see a psychologist, I know now that they would have diagnosed me with a breakdown. Probably put me in hospital, but I muddled my way through. I felt like I sort of took a deep dive into this big well, this big deep dark well, and really went into this really dark space for quite a long time. It was a very dark period of my life. It was the end of my marriage and the loss of a lot of friends and really the loss of my life as I knew it. So a huge loss. So I felt like I was caught up in a lot of depression and the depths of darkness for quite a while. And looking back at it now, I see that it was an opportunity, breaking down to break through. But at the time, I, was just surviving sort of day to day. But when I think about it, like if that hadn't have happened, I possibly would have continued on with my unhealthy coping strategies. And who knows where I would be today. I possibly could have gone down the path of addiction because there is addiction in my family history on my mum's side. I possibly could have gone down that track. But what it did do for me was it landed me in the counselling room. And I found a therapist. For the first time in my life, I went to therapy. And I remember sort of sitting there, and of course it just all came out. And I didn't realise how much I was carrying until I started to talk about it. But it was the beginning of my healing journey. And I remember saying or thinking to myself, looking at the therapist, saying, I want to do what she's doing. And that was when I sort of thought, okay. So I continued on my healing journey with my therapy, but then I sort of started to study in this field. So a bit of a late bloomer into this field. And it was one of the best things that I did because, of course, when you work in this field, you really need to turn the mirror back on yourself and start to really look at some of your patterns of behaviour. And, studying in this field, going back as a mature age student, very insecure about going back and studying. I had no self-confidence and huge inner critic, absolutely huge. And I can remember the actual day and where I was when I was driving along in my car and I heard that song, I Can See Clearly Now, The Rain Has Gone. And it did actually feel like a veil had lifted and all of a sudden I could sort of see things in a lighter light. So that's a little bit of a story around how challenge catapulted me into change. It wasn't easy, and I'm not saying that challenge is easy, But often, you hear many people sort of say, I wouldn't change a thing. I know Patria said that. I wouldn't change a thing about my life. Here's the news. We can't change anything about our life. But often we wish that we could. There's often a wish or a desire that we could go back to the way that it was before. But really, when you think about it, the way that you were before was probably what got you sick or what caused the challenge. I'm not saying you created it, but sometimes we get bolted into waking up to life. Yeah. So, when I look back on my early messages on the ways to overcome challenges, I got things like be good, work hard. If you can't do anything right, don't bother. That's the perfectionism. If you start something, you have to finish it. You have to be, doing something, otherwise you're considered as lazy. And look, I wanted to sort of say, this is not about blaming parents. My mum did a brilliant job, or the best job she could do, given what she was given. She brought us up as a single parent, and she did a wonderful job. So it's not about bashing parents or blaming parents, but it really is about you starting to reflect on perhaps some of those early messages that you've taken on, and how they might inform your behaviours. How you've creatively adjusted or gone into your survival mode. Yeah, because those, as I said, they work. Those patterns work until they don't. And then we start to think, well, how can we do life differently? I want to tell you a little story about Gabor Mate. He is an expert on trauma and addiction, and he's from Canada. And Gabor Mate, he talks about if you're caught in a blizzard in Canada and you don't have any capacity for warmth, you don't have any firewood or any electricity, anything like that. So to survive the blizzard, you put on every piece of clothing that you own, every piece of clothing, and you do survive the blizzard. And then once the blizzard's over, you've got capacity for electricity and firewood, but of course you leave all the clothes on because it becomes familiar to you. Yeah. And this is some of those patterns of behaviour that I was talking to you about before. We leave on, we take on those patterns of behaviour, even though we know it doesn't feel right. Yeah. So, how many layers have you got on, and how uncomfortable is it? And, can we, strip back and maybe take a few layers off to feel a little bit more comfortable. So today we're going to explore how to redefine yourself after major life challenges, and I'm going to get really practical around giving you some strategies and techniques and ways to do that. So what I've been talking about before around, these beliefs and these patterns of behaviour, these coping strategies, down at Quest we call this our second nature. It was my second nature to be responsible. It was my second nature to work hard. It was my second nature to abandon myself and be there for everybody else. But, we sort of say that if we've got a second nature, that sort of begs the question, there has to be a first nature. And what is your first nature? So, let's just think about that for a moment. Perhaps it's coming back to your authentic self. I've just had a new little grandbaby born, a little girl, and she's just absolutely divine. And I was there just after she was born, and just to sort of just watch this little pure essence come into the world, letting her little light shine. And there's just something pure about a child's energy. And of course we all come in like that. We all come in that as that little pure essence with that little light that shines out. But often we have to dim that light or layer up with the clothes on to be able to survive. So maybe our first nature is coming back to that. Coming back to your essential self, to your authentic self, to your essence or your soul energy, if that feels in your belief system as well. Because when we experience a challenge, it's like it disrupts our sense of our old self. It's like if we have a bucket of water, it gets, the universe gets the bucket of water and shakes it, and, all the water spills out, and then we say, oh gosh, what do I do now? So what we're doing is looking at maybe getting a new bucket, putting it into new water, and finding a new version of yourself now that you've got this challenge as well. But of course, let's have a look at some of the feelings or emotions that come up with these challenges. And some of them can be confusion, loss, or frustration. You might experience the loss of your dream, grieving the version of yourself that no longer exists, particularly if you've got limitations, after an accident or an illness. And I can relate to this. I had a knee replacement last December, and in the recovery stage I found myself dropping into a little bit of despair. Poor little old me, I couldn't get up and do what I did before, and dealing with the pain and all that sort of thing. So I went into a little bit of bit of glum and dipped my toe into that depression. So but then I sort of thought about that and took on, that was another belief that I took on, if I'm sitting around doing nothing, I'm lazy. Well, of course I had to sit around and do nothing because I was recovering from a pretty major operation. So I had to really challenge this belief and be gentle with myself and find that self-compassion. Like, it's okay for you to rest. It's okay for you to sit down and watch series of Netflix. I had to give myself a good talking to. I had to take myself in hand and just sort of say, hey girl, like, you've got a new knee. Come on, let's be grateful. Let's go to gratitude. And that really helped me get through. But I could sort of really relate to going to all those feelings. I acknowledged the feelings, and then I gave myself a good talking to and sort of said, come on, you'll be okay. So there can be this sense of mourning the loss of the abilities, roles, and the way life used to be. And sometimes we have this, what we call this transitional phase. It's sort of like the in-between. It can feel like one door behind you is closed and life as you knew it is no longer like that anymore. And there's another door, but it's not open. And you don't feel like you've got a key, you don't know when you open it what's going to be there, because it can feel quite scary to be able to sort of step through into something different. And that really takes trust. Sometimes it can feel like you are at the edge of a precipice and there's fog, and if you step off the edge of this precipice, you don't know whether it's going to be 6 feet or 60 feet. Yeah. So it really is that, it's scary. It's a growth edge. They call it a growth edge, and it's not easy. It can feel unsettling, and feeling in that in-between space of the old identity no longer fits, but that new version is not really clear. Yeah. So if you find yourself asking you that question, who am I now, and you can relate to these feelings of grief or loss or uncertainty, just please know that there is support out there for you. I'll talk more about the Quest programs at the end of this session, but if you feel like you want to get some extra support, you can get a counsellor, go to see a counsellor, or come down to one of our programs where we offer support, care and compassion, but more importantly practical skills on ways to manage challenging situations and how to transition. So let's have a look at how we can sort of rebuild and redefine yourself. And Petria talks, as I mentioned, about this, the third C, making meaning out of the challenge. The meaning that I made from my breakdown was that I wanted to support others to live their best life and to be more present in their life, which is why I do the work that I do. But of course, when I was in that challenge, when I was in that depths of despair, there was no way that I would have been able to make meaning. If somebody would have said to me at that stage, oh, this is happening for a reason, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I probably would have hit them, really, because I wasn't in a good space. I wouldn't have been in a place to be able to hear that. I was just sort of caught up in my despair around my life had ended the way that it was, But here's the thing, often we have to sit with that discomfort, and we have to acknowledge, allow and accept the feelings of pain, suffering and loss. To really wallow in that, to give yourself permission. And this is called the impasse, which feels uncomfortable. And that's that place of sort of sitting between the two doors. One door's closed, there's another door there, and that place of sort of not really knowing. And, with that acknowledging and allowing and accepting the feelings, down at Quest we talk about, one of the teachings is on the mansion of emotions. So if you can imagine that you've got a mansion, and as you walk into the mansion, every room is assigned a different feeling. So metaphorically, you could imagine that you are going into the not coping room, or the sad room, or the grief and loss room, the pity room, feeling sorry for yourself room, whatever it is. And you just go in there and just acknowledge it, allow it, you give yourself permission to feel it with awareness, yeah, and feel it fully. And here's the thing with that model is that you don't need to stay in that room forever. You can give yourself 10, 15 minutes, really feel the feelings fully. Notice the heaviness in the body, the sensations in the body, and just be able to sort of go in there, feel it fully. And then you might want to time it and then come back out and go into the gratitude room. A little bit like what I did with my knee when I was recovering from my knee. I allowed myself to have that feeling of sadness and despair because I couldn't do what I normally do. But then I sort of went into the gratitude room and sort of said, come on, girl, I'm grateful I've got a new knee, yeah. So we want to look at, small practical steps of rediscovering purpose and direction. And like I said, when you're in the midst of it, it might not be the time to think about it, but it might be beneficial to go in and deal and accept the feelings of loss, of sadness, of despair that you might be experiencing at the moment. And you might want to do that with a good counsellor if it feels too big. If it feels like you've got really, really deep depression, don't go into the mansion on your own. See if you can get a good therapist to go in with as well. Just on that sense of meaning, I wanted to just sort of talk to you a little bit about a book that I read years ago, and it was about this a nursing home, and this book. Well, the reason I'm telling you this story is because my mum, talking about challenges, my mum, who is 90 now, is in high care dementia unit in a nursing home. And that really saddens me to go in there and visit my mum and to sort of see that's not a good way to end life. And, so I go in and we, play games and do painting with her and activities and take her down to concerts and all sorts of things. I've got some wonderful things organised in there. But I'm reminded of a book I read years ago, and it was called Being Mortal by Dr. Atal Gawande, Gawande. And he looks at this whole process of aging and dying. It sounds a little bit morbid, but it's actually quite an interesting book, because the way that what he talks about in this book is that we have the capacity to be able to extend life now. My grandmother died of leukemia when she was in her 40s. I'm sure that if she had leukemia now, she would have lived much longer than that because of the medical technology and the treatments that they have now. So he talks about how, yes, we're extending life, but he's looking at the quality of life. And in this book, there's a part of the book where he talks about a doctor that was assigned to a nursing home in upstate New York. And when this doctor went into the nursing home, he was absolutely appalled by what he witnessed when he went in there, because he said they're all just sort of sitting there, totally just disconnected from each other, and basically a waiting room for heaven, as he put it. And so he decided he was going to do an experiment. So he applied for a grant and he received the funding, and I think it was something like 2 or 3 rescue dogs, a couple of rescue cats, a bird for each room, a veggie garden and a live plant for each room. And then they did the experiment and they actually watched people come alive. If you want to have this harks back to the third C, the sense of meaning, because you can imagine being in a nursing home, certainly how can you possibly make meaning out of that? Because they don't have any purpose anymore. They're just sitting there, they don't have any role, any job. And there's this special on Netflix called The Blue Zones, where they sort of look at people that age well, and a lot of those are in community. I think there's 5 or 6 blue zones around the world. And the reason that they're living well is because they're living in community. And they've got a role, they've got a purpose. But anyway, getting back to this story, when this doctor did this experiment with these animals and the live plants, he watched the people come alive. So all of a sudden they started to talk to each other and they started to smile and talk to the animals. Animals are such a beautiful way of connecting. So they started to connect, which is the 4th C, the sense of connection. They started to talk to each other. It's my turn to take the dog for a walk today. It's my turn to feed the cats today. It's my turn to feed the birds today. And, they would just have more conversations. And the trolley that they used to take the meds around on, the medication went down, the levels of antidepressants went down, and then they started to use that trolley to take the bird seat on to go and feed the birds. So I think that's just a beautiful story around that, how we can make meaning, how making meaning and connection can give us a little bit more peace in a situation that when they're in a nursing home as well. So that's Being Mortal by Dr. Atal Gawande, if you want to get through that. So let's have a look at some key approaches here that can help you to get through some of these challenges. So we want to look at some emotional coping strategies. So we've already talked about, perhaps going into the mansion, just to, giving yourself permission, being aware, giving yourself permission, filling it with awareness, and just going in and just allowing that for, 5 or 10 minutes. So accept, acknowledge your feelings, don't suppress them. Allow yourself to grieve, to be frustrated, to feel lost. Yeah. Why wouldn't you feel this way, given what you're going through? Tara Brach has a process. Tara Brach is a spiritual and meditation teacher in America. She has a process called RAIN: recognize, acknowledge, investigate, and nurture. So you recognize the fact that you're going through the challenge that you're going through. You acknowledge the fact that you feel the way you feel. You go in and you investigate, where do you feel that in the body? And then the nurturing. So you offer yourself some self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness that you would offer to a friend. Yeah, to be a little bit gentle with yourself, like, why wouldn't I feel this way? Yeah. Or as I said, you can go into the mansion and just go into that room and just be there for 5 or 10 minutes. Also, mindfulness and presence, doing that little mindfulness practice we did at the beginning, will really help you stay in the present moment, rather than going back into regrets. If only I would have done this would have happened, or fears about the future. I don't know what's ahead, I don't know about this door. I don't want to step through because I don't know what's there. Just see if you can be in the present moment, and that can come through meditation and mindfulness practices. The other thing is cognitive coping strategies. So that's reframing your challenge. So instead of seeing something that this is happening to you, maybe consider it could be happening for you. What can you learn from this? What are you gaining from this? Yeah, what's the opportunity here? Often it gives us an opportunity to slow down. Yeah, to slow down in our life, our fast-paced life, and sort of start to do a little bit of reflection on, okay, what am I going to do with myself for the rest of my life? The other thing is to focus on what you can control. Let go of things that are beyond your control and direct your energy to around what you can do. It's so much easier, I have to say. And like I've discussed before, I want you to really think about challenging those negative thoughts. Just ask yourself, is that true? Who told you that? Is this helping me? And if not, replace it with a more empowering perspective. Yeah? So that's that reframing and challenging those negative thoughts and those negative beliefs. And look, some practical coping strategies. Maybe break it down into smaller chunks, because it can feel overwhelming. So there might be small steps that you can take. The small things are the big things, and you're still making progress even though it's small. You might want to put a little bit of routine or structure into your day. Maintaining that daily rhythm can provide you with stability in chaotic times. See if you can maintain healthy habits. Prioritise your sleep, your nutrition, movement, and I really want to focus on this movement. It keeps your body and your mind strong, so any sort of yoga practices, very gentle yoga practices, stretches. There's a practice called the Feldenkrais, which is very, very gentle, small movements, and they developed it for people that were in hospital that had limited movement, and these very small moves are really, really helpful. So Feldenkrais, or very gentle yoga, chair yoga. You can even do some stretches when you're laying in bed. If you want to do is just Google it. You can Google anything nowadays, and you can get lots of ideas. But very gently, if you can, just keep on moving that body and listen to your body. What does your body need? Maybe it needs a little bit of love. I know when I had my knee done, I was directing a lot of love down to my knee because there's a lot of trauma there, they cut the bone and get hammers and all sorts of things. So I was listening to my body and just directing lots of love to that area of my body, and I said lots of gratitude as well. So that was that reframing as well. So, social and relational coping strategies as well. I'm just going to suggest to you that you maybe seek some support, talk to a friend, a family, or as I said, get a good therapist. You don't have to go through this alone. Set boundaries, protect your energy by limiting time with people or situations that drain you. Those people that they feel like energy suckers. And here's the thing, often when we've got some sort of health challenge or limitations in our life, we've got an excuse. We don't have to say yes all the time. We can say no and get away with it, but we don't want to wait until we get to a challenge to enforce a good boundary. So that little word NO is sometimes often hard to say. So, but when we've got a challenge, we often have permission to say, look, I just can't make it, I'm not feeling well. So protect yourself. Watch where you spread your energy. How much energy you want to give out to other people. Can you bring it back to yourself? And look, I'm also thinking sometimes it's good to help others if you're in a place where you can help others. And the reason I say that is because sometimes it takes the focus away from your own suffering, and supporting others can bring you a sense of purpose. So, just want to drop that one in. It might be something you might want to consider as well. And, spirituality, maybe to connect with something bigger than yourself, could be really helpful during this time. That could be nature, faith, prayer, meditation, just anchoring into something that is much, much bigger than yourself can provide comfort. And we've already mentioned gratitude. Even in hard times, there is something to be grateful for. It could be gratitude for this fact that we don't live in a war-torn country, or that we've got a roof over our head, or that we've got food on our plate. So the small blessings can shift your mindset, and it might even be good to start up a practice of a gratitude journal. Perhaps because of the challenge you're going through, people are coming into your life to support you, and for once you can lean into some support. Might feel a little bit uncomfortable, particularly if you've got that pattern of I do it myself. But maybe you can be grateful for the people that are around you that are supporting you. Or as I said, the little things. Somebody made you a cup of tea, brought you some lunch, whatever it was. So challenges in life can reveal hidden strengths and new possibilities. I know when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't seem like that, but I want you to hold that hope here. This is an opportunity for change. So I'm going to dive into a bit of a guided visualization now, and I can't see anybody online, so I'm hoping this is coming through, otherwise I'm just talking to myself, but we're going to do this little guided visualization here. So this is the power of visualization, and I want to say it's incredibly powerful because once you start to visualize things, you're actually starting to set an intention of how you want things to be. So I'm going to invite you, if you can, to close your eyes, and I want you to sit into a comfortable seated position or even into a lying position for this one. So just take some time to get yourself comfortable. Just for about a 10-minute practice. And again, just start to focus on your breath. And just as you breathe in, breathing deep down into the belly, and then the longer exhalation, maybe letting go with a bit of a sigh. Just 2 more of those breaths. Slightly longer, deeper inhalation, and then letting go with a sigh. And 1 more. And just allowing the breath to return to its natural flow, its natural rhythm. And just imagining now, because you can do anything in your imagination, Just imagine that you are standing at a threshold between the past and the future. Maybe you might like to imagine that you're on a long stretch of beach, maybe somewhere where the rainforest meets the ocean. I'm thinking of beaches up around northern New South Wales, up around Cape Tribulation, where the rainforest comes down and meets the ocean. You've got this beautiful long stretch of beach with powdery white soft sand and beautiful crystal clear blue water, with the waves gently rolling in and rolling out. And here you are on this beach, just all by yourself. A beach that extends for quite a long way. And as you're standing on this beach, at the age and stage that you are now, with the current challenge, whatever it is you're dealing with, just know that behind you there's a timeline going right back to when you were born. And I'm going to invite you now to see yourself starting to turn around and look back along that timeline. And just start to look back through your life, through the ages and stages, maybe when you were a child, a teenager, your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, depending how old you are now. Just looking back at all the things that you've had to deal with in your life and how you've survived your life, navigated your life, perhaps in an unconscious way. Maybe there's been lots of challenges where you've been thrown off or derailed and picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, got back up on the rails again. You've had a lot of resilience, kept busy, whatever it is. Maybe the busyness, abandoning yourself or avoiding, people pleasing, pushing down emotions, whatever it was. Just sort of see if you can look back at the younger versions of yourself with a sense of compassion. Just knowing that you did the best you could do with what you were given. Just looking back from heart with compassion. And if you had a message for your younger self, what would it be? Just take a moment. What would you say to your younger self? Perhaps it might be something like, you did the best that you could do. You've survived your life the best way you knew how. You are not your mistakes. You are allowed to rest. You're allowed to be gentle and self-compassionate. It might be something like, you deserve love and support. And maybe taking a moment, just taking a moment to thank them, those younger versions of yourself. Just taking a moment to thank them for getting you through up to this stage. Just with a sense of compassion and gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for all that you've done. And now very slowly see yourself starting to turn around and looking in the opposite direction, looking forward. And as you turn around, you'll see that there is a door there in front of you. And maybe get a sense of what this door looks like. Is it an old timber door? Is it embellished? What colour is it? See if you can open that door and step through that door. And as you step through that door, you're opening up to this beautiful expanse of powdery white soft sand with the rainforest coming down. And see yourself walking along this beach, projecting forward into the future, drinking in the beauty around you, the smells, the smell of the ocean, nature, the sounds of the waves. Maybe the breeze rustling the leaves of the trees, the bird song. Maybe feeling the warmth of the sunlight on your body, that powdery white, soft sand under your feet. Just walking along here on this beautiful expanse of beach. And as you get towards the end of the beach, you notice that there's somebody there waiting for you. And as you get closer, you see that this is the best version of yourself. Just meeting this version of yourself in the future who has embraced transformation and change. Just really take a moment to see what they look like, how they move, maybe what they're wearing, maybe see the glint in their eyes, maybe the smile. There's an aliveness here. Maybe their light is shining out. And just see yourself living with all of the qualities that you wish and desire in your life. Here they are, right in front of you. Perhaps living with a sense of peace, ease, self-compassion, being okay with who you are, loving life, and being filled with gratitude for every moment of every minute of every day. This best version of yourself is now standing in front of you, and perhaps they hold your hands and looking lovingly into your eyes, and they have a message for you. And what wisdom, what message do they have for you? Just taking a moment to listen. Perhaps they could be saying something like, I'm here, you've got this. Be gentle with yourself. And you've got this. Be gentle with yourself. And just being filled with a sense of gratitude for this opportunity. See yourself turning around now and maybe bringing this version back with you. Bringing back some of the qualities. If you could bring back these qualities to support you through your current challenge, what would they be? Perhaps it would be self-forgiveness, understanding, gentleness, kindness. Absorb these qualities and feel the shift within yourself. You might even like to imagine that there's a colour that represents all of these qualities. And you can breathe in this colour until it fills and spills into every part of your body. Just feeling the integration of all of these amazing qualities that's going to support you through this current challenge, into stepping into this new version of yourself. And breathing in these qualities and making a commitment to yourself that you will consciously bring in these qualities into your everyday life, because you matter. Because you matter. And now walking back to the part of the beach where you first began, and stepping through the door, but leave the door open. Leave the door open to potentials and possibilities. And just feeling really centered and grounded as you start to lengthen your breath and bring in these qualities back with you to support you. Gently bring yourself back to the present moment with a sense of gratitude. Just lengthening the breath, maybe getting a little bit of movement in your body, having a bit of a stretch, moving your head from side to side. And when you're ready, just take your time. I'm going to invite you to open your eyes. So I hope you found that visualization helpful. The power of visualization is incredible. So if you're feeling stuck or down, just imagine breathing in that colour and those qualities that will support you to gently transition through the challenge, to really support you. It's really sort of self-supporting. You know, we can seek support from other people, that's absolutely wonderful, but this is a way of being able to support yourself, and that's coming back to that loving kindness and compassion to yourself. And I'm going to invite you, if you'd like to maybe take a moment to journal or even draw what you experience there in that visualization. So, look, I just want to finish off by sort of saying that our identity is fluid, and the challenges allow us the opportunity to connect back with our authentic self. And as I said, maybe, you know, the meaning that you make from the current challenge is to let go of all of those second nature patterns of behaviour, all of those coping strategies, all of those survival strategies that you've had in your life, maybe where you've abandoned yourself. Maybe the meaning that you make from it is that you're going to reconnect back with your authentic self. Yeah, back to your essence, back to your first nature. That is a beautiful meaning to have in life. Yeah. So if some of this has resonated for you today and you feel like you want to gain more support, as I said, please seek out a counsellor. There's a list of Quest counsellors on the Quest website, or get in contact with the Quest for Life Centre and find out about our residential healing programs. We've got the Quest for Life program, which I'm on from tomorrow. It's a program where people have a diagnosis, physical disease process in the body. The Healing Your Life program, which is when you're confronted with any of the Ds or a challenge. The Moving Beyond Trauma, which is specifically for if you've experienced trauma in your life. And then we have lots of weekend programs as well. We've got a Wellness for Women, we've got a men's program, Maintaining Your Memory. All of that information is on the website, so please have a look. There's also some online courses as well. Lots of ways that you can get extra support. So I do hope that you've been able to get something from today and enjoyed today. So here we are. I think what it is, it's because I live at the back of the valley and the internet is very slow. So it's all these talks, all these comments are coming through now. So thank you, Rod. I've got Tricia here and I've got Jeanette as well, and I'm sure some more comments will come through later as well. So look, thank you for joining me today. It's been so wonderful. I'm going to go out and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day, Sunday, and get out into the garden and just have a little bit of downtime. And I really invite you to do the same as well. And I hope to see you at Quest at some stage in the future, or I'll see you again on one of these At Home with Quest, which is on Wednesdays at 11 a.m, or as I said, on Quest Connect, which is the first Sunday of the month. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again for joining me. Bye for now.